Hello! All right, so first thing, obviously the frequency of these videos went down dramatically once I started considering that I might be faculty. So apologies for the gap. But I have given myself 10 minutes to make this video, and then I'm gonna go out to dinner with my dad because I feel like that's the only way to combat my perfectionistic paranoia. Also, I know for a fact that a friend of mine was like binge watched my video, so that makes me feel like some of you actually care about me, and I do want to keep you posted, even though a lot of you are too busy to actually schedule a call with me. Maybe you actually like these insights. So I do have some positive updates. I mean, a bunch of things happened, but I can't go into all of them. Um, so I think one thing that I really was quite a revelation to me is I was doing a hypnosis exercise, and the reason is that I went back to this book that I'd read as in high school, Many Lives, Many Masters. It's about a very established psychiatrist who would use hypnosis to help his clients access old memories. And then with some clients, with one client in particular who walked into his office, severe anxieties and stuff, he did this, and then she started recounting what seemed like past life memories. And sorry, my mom, I'm in the middle of a live stream, mom, sorry. And then yeah, all right, 8 minutes. Go. All right. And yeah, so then what happened was, like, at first he was skeptical, but then she like started recounting from like the space between lives. It's like so procedural. It's like weird. She started recounting messages from his father and dead son, essentially. And there were details in there, like his son died of literally 1 in a million heart condition, and when he was like 10 days old, and she knew about this, which he was a very private thing that he wasn't, like, there's no way she could have known that. And well, that we know of. And then her symptoms started improving as she recounted all these traumas from past lives, and had like knowledge of like how to make butter and ancient Egyptian artifacts corresponding to these past lives. So it's really like some kind of memory conduit opened over space time, and then they were able to flow into her brain in the present. um, so yeah, I remember in high school it was just like too mind blowing, and also a little bit. I think I just didn't know how to reconcile it with the world that I was in, where people were just going on with their lives as though nothing changed. So I think I must have told myself some version of maybe the whole thing is like some massive conspiracy theory, not knowing at the time how hard it is to organize people into a conspiracy that massive. Because if people love to blow the whistle on stuff, especially stuff that the wider community is going to celebrate them for, right? So if there's any fraud in these things, someone always blows the whistle. But with this psychiatrist, like, he was a hot shot, and then he took a big reputational risk to talk about this stuff. And indeed, people have just, like, the scientific community has kind of ignored him. Of course, like, the wider world is like, this is revolutionary. But then even this his book was published, I think, decades ago, and I think after it was on the New York Times bestseller for some time, and then I guess people just fall back into their lives the way I fell back into my life when I couldn't reconcile like the trauma that I was encountering. I just didn't know how to navigate it. So it really tells you that the limit here is actually people not knowing how to apply it to their lives, because the theory is fine, but the practice is hard. Anyway, so hopefully me documenting videos like this will help. Anyway, so as part of that, I was like very curious. So I like tried a hypnosis exercise, and of course, I did not manage to regress to a past life. I can barely lucid dreams. I know I have a lot of work to do there with whatever skill allows you to enter these hypnotic states. But I did discover something extremely elementary and very interesting to me, which was that I found it way easier to visualize myself in a scene if I visualized that scene in third person. If I tried to visualize it in first person, not only was it all blurry, but I would feel like kind of uncomfortable. Like the scene would like kind of shift. And I also visited like this intuitive psychotherapist, and it was very interesting. Like I was just describing like the 2017 trauma, and then she just asked me, did anything significant happen at age 7? And indeed, at age 7, like, we moved houses, and I lost a friend group that I really liked, and I was a young kid and had trouble making friends. So I was, and my mom says, yeah, you were very sad after that move. But I'd never before in therapy thought to like describe it as a significant event, because to me it was like, normal people move, right? But it was significant for me, and I remember thinking it was very unfair because like the move was what, to a bigger house. I'm like, how is a big house worth losing this wonderful friend group? Like it was just like purely a big negative for me, and I didn't have any power because I was a kid, right? But yeah, it was so interesting that she just asked about that, and thereby was able to uncover something that no therapist would have been able to uncover, because I never thought to think of it as meaningful or significant or highlighted in any way. So, and she also asked, like, the ring that I was wearing, she said that it was, she asked me to send a picture of it because she was like, every time you move your hand, your energy, that hand, your energy changes. And she said the ring is tending towards neutral energy, and it's good to stop wearing it because since you're down, it can accumulate negative energy, and then you get into this negative spiral. So my hypothesis is that on some, like, again, through some weird space-time tunneling, some part of her is able to like pick up all the associations that sentient, this is my hypothesis, that sentient creatures have with an object, and basically give her it, so she gets a readout, like positive, negative, neutral, or she gets a vibe. And so something about, like, it's all connected to memories, right? She just has some way to visualize memory patterns. And I think the energy associated with a ring, I mean, the and feeling you get associated with the ring is all about your associations, right? It's all about your memories associated with the ring is what defines the energy of a ring, doesn't it? And that's why a ring can accumulate negative energies, because if it can accumulate negative associations if you walk around with a ring in a negative situation. So I think that's what these psychics are doing without their knowledge in these situations. They're reading some kind of summary statistic of the memories. That's my working hypothesis, but we'll see. And she did some other interesting things, which, I'm just too private to talk about at the minute, but it was cool. Yeah. And so she gave me this exercise of imagine yourself climbing up a mountain for 3 minutes. And it was so hard for me because she was like, look down at your shoes. And I'm like, I don't even picture my feet. And I like, look down what shoes. I have to imagine shoes. And it was very hard. And the scene kept shifting. But then I noticed when I switched to third person, suddenly I can just like imagine a me in third person, because the third person you is not even a you. So from that, I noticed that, yeah, day-to-day life, I've been checking in more and more. I do tend to just kind of live in my thoughts, live in some kind of like television version of the world where my thoughts are streaming, and I think about everything in the third person, and I very rarely exert first person presence. So maybe that's going to be step one in unwinding my trauma. I did discontinue in-person treatments at the Ayurvedic clinic after the anxiety associated with, so just leaving my nest every time, just like psyching myself up to interact with, and especially shifting venues, those things can, they take energy. So, right, going to an Ayurvedic clinic is not like a cost less affair. It does create anxiety. And I was doing it like every day, except for maybe one day off when the clinician wasn't there. But so it was causing quite a bit of anxiety. And then on top of that, acupuncture, controversial health benefits. And then especially after I got bitten by a mosquito during one of the acupuncture sessions. So like you can't even relax then because like there's needles coming out of your calf. And then on top of that, you could see a mosquito like hovering around there. So like, my God, that was an unpleasant session. I felt very powerless against the mosquito. I had needles coming out of me everywhere. And then on top of that, like the clinician there said something insensitive. Like she asked me when I had eaten. I truthfully answered that my first meal was after 3 p.m. And then she's like, do you want to get better or not? And I'm like, dude, like a huge amount of my trauma has to do with food. You were present in the session where I talked about this. Like this, not helping. And then on top of that, she was like, reduce your Cannapain, which the Cannapain was the one thing that was like reliably helping with the PTSD symptoms. And I'm like, this. So just the combination of those three, I was like, okay, if I force myself to go to this clinic now, I will be doing so begrudgingly. And I know from plenty of experience that when I make myself do something begrudgingly, eventually I just quit. It just doesn't work. It doesn't just magically click. So I like it, the experience accumulates negative associations, and then the next time you do it, yeah, whatever. But I did, as per my ethics, have a dignified conversation with the doctor where I explained all this. And I explained that, these things happen, and I talked about the mosquito and the getting told off, and I'm like, all of these things, and the lack of belief in acupuncture, and I'm like, these things, like, they tipped me over such that the anxiety associated with going to the clinic it feels like it's making it worse. right? The whole experience is now not something that I feel in a place to do. But I agreed to still take the other Ayurvedic medications. And the doctor was very understanding, and she invited me to come back if I, felt better after some time, and hopefully they'll add some mosquito repellents to their acupuncture sessions. And yeah, and then she said she'd send me some studies on the benefits of acupuncture. And by the way, getting bit by mosquitoes in India, my parents are like paranoid that I'll get dengue. So it's like not a small thing to like be eaten by a mosquito, because you're thinking, is this the bite that gives me dengue or whatever, you know? Um, so yeah, I'm gonna try to join morning yoga sessions with my mom instead. I tried that before, but then discontinued. And it's always because I make myself do them begrudgingly, and then it just doesn't work in the long run. So I'm gonna try to like figure out how to do them not begrudgingly, and that's gonna require getting sleep. So it's tricky. But freed from the judgment of the people at this clinic for me using Cannapain, which I had a prescription for from a different clinic, but whatever. They were like, oh, it's like has this addictive tendencies. And I'm like, by that logic, any antidepressant that you take is addictive because it helps you. So it helps me. So I want to take it. Like, anyway, it's just, I really don't know why cannabis is in a different category from all the other meds that we put in our system. It's probably to do, I've heard that it's due to economic reasons, like the hemp plant competes with cotton. And so there's an incentive to make hemp hard to use, and the drug paranoia combined, like from the hippie counterculture, whatever. There's like some history, but it's not pretty history. As usual, there's like not a good reason for these things. But however, freed from the judgment of the people at that clinic, I like went back to increasing my Cannapain use. And I was using THC quite a bit in the US, and it was helping. It was really helping. It makes me feel like a human, puts me in touch with my body, anti-dissociates me. But yeah, I increased my Cannapain use and immediately started feeling like a human again. I actually took a fair bit of THC to get through the conversation with the doctor, because I'm like, I'm having a frank conversation. I need to be in touch with my feelings. Otherwise, I can't communicate as easily. And then, yeah, immediately started acting like a human. Like my parents were like, wow, this is a lot better. I realized that, sometimes even the memories associated with being at home, they bring, like, just being in this room, it's bringing back a lot of childhood stuff that I'm going to have to redo my associations with this room and have because I was very sad and isolated as a child. And I felt very bad about myself most of the time, honestly. I felt I was just fueled by a lot of punishing of myself, because everybody around me had like motivated me to do things by like being mean to me. My sister was like culprit number one. And she admits this, she would, yeah, whatever. I don't want to get into that. But yeah, and so, well, okay, so she, in an act of good self-awareness, she has taken responsibility for the fact that it was a beautiful line she used, that she said, I'm sorry that I would find the sharpest arrows I could find and pierce you to try to help you, to try to make you stronger. I should have been on your side of the bubble pushing outwards. Now, of course, she says this, but then after having said this, goes on to do the piercing thing. But yeah, when I was like, like I would communicate that I was triggered, I needed to get away from her, and then she would like react by blaming me for not handling my triggers right, because when step one of handling your triggers is move away from the PTSD trigger, which was her behavior, and then she reacts by, anyway, that gives you a sense of like the kind of savior complex type of dynamics, right? When somebody with a savior complex tries to help you and they're not able to help you, immediately start blaming you, even though literally that attitude of blaming you is the problem, which you have acknowledged. It annoys me that she like forgets everything she knows about trauma when it's not her trauma. Anyway, whatever. But yes, I was taking more and more Cannapain, in touch with my emotions, having these frank conversations. And yeah, like then I woke up today feeling good. And I actually called. I have like phone call phobia, but I managed to call and inquire about drama lessons. And I look forward to that, man. Drama was like growing up in high school, and even when I was young, like, my sister was very creative, and she in the childhood home friend group, she would put on these she and her friends would put on these plays, and I would get to participate. But it was really nice. Like theater is like the one venue where it's okay to let your emotions overflow, and I feel like I never have those opportunities. I just keep everything pent up by dissociating from my body almost unconsciously. So that was really exciting. I also had like this brainwave idea that it wouldn't it be really fun to have a game that basically, because I spent so much time thinking about the stuff that happened with my therapist and what it might have been like from her perspective. I'm spending a lot of time reading about like psychology and just to try to understand her perspective. So since I'm thinking about the perspective of a therapist so much, and I loved, making games as a kid, I would just make them for fun. I loved coding and all that, and I loved thinking about systems. Wouldn't it be so cool if we had this game where we basically simulate how trauma can get a psyche all tangled up? All right, and then we figure out ways to disentangle it. So the idea for the game is that like you'd simulate being a therapist for a client whose psyche and their psychic entanglements are like artificially generated. So we simulate some kind of life history, and then we simulate how that would manifest as an outward personality. And your job is to work with the client to figure out the way to gain their trust, then figure out the ways in which they're stuck, and then help them untangle themselves. But the kicker is that the therapist would also have their own simulated psyche, because like everybody has like some stuff, right? And then that simulated psyche would give them their own biases, and so they'd have to disentangle their own biases, and you'd simulate the process of introspection before they can help the client. But like, yeah, and there's so many challenges, right? When you remove one defense, like if like my dissociation defense developed to cope with a lot of pain. So if you like remove the dissociation, then I have to confront the pain, and I might enter a state of dysfunction. So it's not easy to switch from one state of being to a totally different state of being. You can't do it one at a time. You have to shift many things at once in order to like do that transition. And I think a lot of psychology research these days is limited because we're obsessed with the things that are easy to measure. I read this in psychology books by like leading thinkers, being like they're despairing at how this behavioral psychology, which is all about external behaviors, is ignoring the fact that similar external behaviors can be generated through very different internal places. And if you're motivated, say, through like shame and self-loathing, that's not sustainable. Like similar outward patterns, but depending on where it's coming from, one is sustainable, the other is like warning signs. And so psychology has, if it's obsessed with behaviors, external behaviors, then how do you you can't account for this. You can't think about it systematically. Like, yeah. And so like psychology research struggles to quantify the impact of interventions like psychoanalysis, because psychoanalysis deals with things that are hard to measure. However, if we have a simplified model, and I am hoping to develop this model because I really do love thinking about systems and how they're interconnected. So my goal is to like read psychology books by like really good, thoughtful, empathetic psychoanalytic thinkers who are really like Dr. McWilliams, who described the schizoid personality, which I think I mentioned it in previous episodes. Schizoids like me were routinely dissociated from our bodies as a coping mechanism, but we have like a very rich internal world, and that makes it hard for us to relate to the outside world. And anyway, right? So she's written these wonderful books on like psychoanalytic diagnosis, and is working on a book for the lay audience. So I can't wait till that one comes out. But my goal is like internalize it all, and then yeah, just it'd be fun to kind of combine my childhood interests with this obsession of mine, just find a way to link it all together and turn it into something that other people can use. Hey, so my hope is that, yeah, by building a model of it, sometimes you can then test the things around the model. That's how you deal with complex situations. Things that are hard to like describe, you have to model them, and then you can describe them, and then you can measure them. So maybe it will help that way. I don't know, but for now, I think the goal is actually you always have to, there's like this external motivation to do this, but you also need like an internal motivation. You need to I found that I need to find something where the internal and external motivations meet. So I have like my internal motivation in that I can't stop thinking about the way things went down, the crazy stuff that went down with my ex-therapist. And instead of making that a thing that's sucking up all my time, why not use it and then combine it with my existing interests? And so that's me in the breakthrough phase. finding a way to unite all the things. Also bought a lot of Roger Penrose books online and looking forward to reading them. One was published last year and is called The Road to Reality, A Complete Guide to the Laws of the Universe. So should be fun. And he has this wonderful thing written in the foreword being like, some of you feel like you won't be able to understand the math here because you feel like you can't even wrap your head around fractions. But I think that's because when you think about fractions, you think of a stern teacher who just was making you work on fractions, but was not giving you any motivation. And he's like, maybe by getting in touch with the larger reason to know these things, you'll find yourself motivated. And anyway, I got distracted. But I just really loved that he led with that. This is his belief that I love teaching. I'm an optimist, and I'm going to make fractions accessible to everybody. By motivating them by the beauty of the universe, understanding the beauty of the universe. So I think, I try not to have idols because when idols fall, it's rough. And by idolizing one person, you get this halo effect where you idolize other things about them. You assume everything they do is good when, everyone that I know has a mix of traits. But I think this person maybe, just for that, maybe approaching like role model status for me. So not for the Nobel laureate in physics. No, it's for that line about wanting to make fractions accessible by motivating through the